In the entire, sprawling darkness of the Second World War, few figures emerged as quietly and as lethally as Kurt Knispel. He did not deliver speeches. He did not stand for photographs, and he did not seek glory. He lived most of his short life inside the steel belly of a tank, where the roar of engines drowned out the world and the flash of cannon fire illuminated the faces of men who had forgotten fear. In the annals of tank warfare, no gunner on any side of the conflict would ever surpass his record. 168 confirmed tank kills, countless more unconfirmed, a presence so calm, so calculating, and so deadly that enemies who survived his attacks came to speak of him not as a man, but as something else entirely, the ghost of the Eastern Front. But legends do not begin with myths, they begin with people. And this is the story of the man behind the myth. Kurt Knispel was born on September 20th, 1921, in Salisfeld, a small German-speaking village in the Sudetenland. Life was hard, days were long, and the future for most boys was already decided before they were tall enough to see over the fields. He was the son of working-class parents. They expected little from the world, and the world expected little from them. But Kurt was different even as a teenager. Taller, stronger, more observant. He wasn't the loudest in a room or the quickest to speak, but he had a way of watching everything with a kind of stillness that made even adults uneasy. His instructors at vocational school noticed the same thing. A gifted mechanic, precise hands, a natural sense for engines, gears, and machines. But war has a way of choosing men long before they choose it. When he was drafted into the Wehrmacht in 1940, he was not yet the ghost. He was simply a young man, staring into an uncertain future, unaware that his instincts sharper than steel would soon carve terror into the hearts of enemy crews. Knispel entered the world of armored warfare as a loader and gunner in training battalions. The work was brutal. Heavy shells, endless drills, screaming instructors, hours inside metal ovens that reached temperatures few men could bear. But something happened during these early months. Knispel began to change. Where others hesitated, he acted. Where others panicked, he steadied himself. Where others needed instructions, he simply knew. There were stories, small ones at first. How he could spot a distant glint on the horizon no one else could see. How he could judge distance and velocity with uncanny accuracy. How his hands seemed connected to the turret traverse controls as if they were part of him. By the time he completed his training, his superiors realized they were not dealing with an ordinary gunner. They were looking at a savant in the art of armored combat. And so, in late 1941, as the Eastern Front burned under the weight of Operation Barbarossa, Knispel was assigned to the 3rd Panzer Division. There, he would face the Soviet war machine head-on for the first time. The Eastern Front was a monster of iron and ice. Snowstorms swallowed entire battalions. Mud turned tank engines into screaming metal animals. Temperatures dropped so low that steel cracked like brittle glass. It was here on these frozen, killing fields that Knispel fired his first shot in anger. He manned the gun of a Panzer IV, the workhorse of the German armored corps. Its armor was thin by later standards. Its gun, already struggling against the heavier Soviet tanks, demanded a steady and intelligent hand. Knispel delivered both. His first kill was a T-34 emerging from a shattered barn, its barrel swinging toward his platoon. Others hesitated. Knispel did not. He fired a single round. The shell struck the Soviet tank at 800 meters, slipping beneath its front glacis plate, the weakest spot, and detonating inside the hull. Flames burst from its hatches like the roar of a dying dragon. The crew cheered. His commander glanced at him with disbelief, but Knispel simply reloaded and said nothing. It was only the beginning. As the months ground on, Knispel's kill count rose with terrifying speed. His ability to see targets others could not became legendary within his unit. Commanders began requesting him. Gunners begged to train under him. Even tank aces with higher rank deferred to his judgment. But Knispel himself never celebrated. He avoided medals, avoided photographers, avoided the propaganda machine. He often refused awards because he believed other men deserved them more. To some officers, this made him difficult. To his crew, it made him irreplaceable. By 1943, he was serving as a gunner in the massive Tiger I and Tiger II tanks, beasts of war that required strength, discipline, and nerves of iron. Knispel possessed all three. Inside a Tiger tank, in the dim orange glow of instrument lights, Kurt Knispel became something more than human. The Tiger's 88mm gun was already legendary, capable of destroying Soviet tanks at over 2 kilometers. But in the hands of Knispel, it became a surgical instrument and a hammer of annihilation. His commander reported that Knispel could identify a T-34 by the shape of its silhouette. Against a sunrise, he could tell whether an enemy tank was stationary or advancing based solely on vibrations through the tank floor. He could predict where an enemy would appear before anyone else even raised binoculars. His kill count soared: 12, 30, 50, 80, 115, 150. And still he refused medals. From 1942 to 1944, Knispel fought across some of the most brutal battlefields of the war: Stalingrad approaches Kharkov and Kursk and Belgorod, the Narva line, the retreat through Poland, the forests and marshes of Belarus. Everywhere he went, Soviet tank crews learned a simple, chilling rule: if a Tiger is firing from the tree line, pray it isn't Knispel. But war does not reward skill forever. Every victory brought new dangers, and every retreat brought them closer to the desperate final months of the war. That by late 1944, the German army was collapsing on all fronts. The Western Allies pressed in from France. The Red Army crushed resistance in Poland. Fuel was scarce, ammunition was dwindling, and morale hung by a thread. It was during this period that a new nickname began to spread among Allied scouts and tank crews: the Ghost of the Ardennes. Reports described a Tiger II that appeared without warning, struck with devastating accuracy, and vanished before air support could counterattack. Some swore the tank moved impossibly fast for its size. Others claimed it fired from ranges no German gun should have been able to hit. In winter fog, in the deep forests, in the silent hours before dawn, Knispel hunted like a phantom. But the truth behind this legend was simple. He was doing what he always did, protecting his crew, fighting for survival, and navigating a war slipping into chaos. By early 1945, the Eastern Front had become a nightmare of burning villages, endless Soviet artillery barrages, and unstoppable T-30 for swarms. Knispel, now a veteran far beyond his years, continued to fight with a calmness that defied logic. He had earned the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross nomination, Germany's highest award, but never received it. Some said it was because he refused to flatter superiors. Others believed officers were jealous of a non-commissioned man, becoming the most successful tank ace in history. But for Knispel, awards meant nothing. His only loyalty was to the men beside him. And as the Soviet tide surged westward, he prepared for the final battles of his life. The final winter of the war was unlike any that had come before it. By 1945, Germany was no longer fighting for victory, only for time. And yet, amid the ruins of collapsing fronts and exhausted divisions, Kurt Knispel remained at his gun, guiding his crew through the dying hours of the Reich. He was no romantic about war, no believer in the politics that had started it. He fought because his men needed him, because, in a world falling apart, he could still offer them one thing: a chance to survive. His Tiger II, a monstrous 70-ton machine known as Knigstiger, shook the frozen earth as it maneuvered across the Moravian countryside. The tank was bruised, scarred, patched together with whatever parts could still be scavenged. Its once proud armor bore the marks of 100 battles. The paint was burned. The skirts were torn away. The engine coughed like an old soldier struggling to breathe. But it still moved, and as long as it moved, Knispel would fight. On April 28, 1945, Soviet spearheads pushed toward Wostitz near the Czech border. The German lines were fractured. Units were scattered. Few officers remained. The roads were clogged with refugees fleeing west, desperate to escape the advancing Red Army. Knispel and his platoon received a simple order: delay the Soviets. Buy time for civilians to escape. Hold the village at all costs. It was a suicide mission, and everyone knew it. The Tiger lumbered into position behind a cluster of farm buildings, its long barrel aimed at the distant tree line. Snow swirled in the wind like drifting ash. The sky was an iron gray, heavy with the promise of more killing. Knispel climbed halfway out of the turret to survey the land. He could see smoke rising from distant houses, villages burning one by one. As the Soviet juggernaut rolled forward, his commander asked, "What do you think, Kurt?" Knispel did not look away from the horizon. "They'll come fast," he said. "They always do." And then he added, more quietly, "But we'll make them pay for every meter." His crew nodded, trusting him completely. At noon, the Soviets came. First, a low rumble, distant engines. Then the crack of artillery. Then the shapes emerged through the mist. T-3 for S, dozens of them. Followed by assault guns. Followed by infantry riding on the tanks like waves on a tide of steel. The earth trembled under their advance. Inside the Tiger, the crew remained silent. They had seen this too many times. They knew how it ended. Knispel pressed his eye to the sight. "Range, 1,900 meters, he said calmly. "Target, lead tank, left side." The Tiger fired. The recoil rocked the earth. The shell streaked across the field and punched through the first T-34 like paper. The turret launched skyward in a burst of flame. Knispel was already aiming at the next target. Load. Fire. Load. Fire. Load. Fire. Each shot found its mark. 3 T-34s fell in under 30 seconds. But the Soviets did not stop. They accelerated. As Soviet tanks fanned out, trying to flank his position, Knispel shifted his aim. Right side. Hull down, tank behind the ridge. Fire. Another explosion. Another tank destroyed. But now the artillery began to find its range. Shells thundered into the ground around them, shaking the Tiger, showering the crew with dust and metal fragments. Engine hits. The driver shouted. Minor damage, still moving. Knispel wiped the soot from his face and kept firing. Target. Su-76 on the left. Boom. A Soviet assault gun. Vanished in a blossom of smoke. Two more on the ridge. Boom. Boom. The battlefield was a storm of fire. Soviet infantry now advanced on foot through the fields, screaming their battle cries, firing anti-tank rifles and launching grenades. In the chaos, one of Knispel's supporting tanks, a Panther, took a direct hit and erupted in flames. Its turret flew off, tumbling into the dirt like a broken crown or still. Knispel fought on. The end came suddenly. A Soviet IS-2 heavy tank, a beast armed with a massive 120mm gun, crested a ridge 1,500 meters away. It fired the instant its barrel aligned with Knispel's position. The shell struck the farm building beside the Tiger. The structure exploded, hurling wooden beams and stones across the vehicle. Inside, the crew was thrown violently. Knispel slammed against the turret rim, dazed but conscious. IS-2, he shouted. Traverse left, load AP. The Tiger's turret swung slowly. It was too slow, too heavy, too damaged. The Soviet gun fired a second time. The shot hit the Tiger directly. The shell punched through the side armor, ripping a hole the size of a fist. Shrapnel blasted through the interior, bouncing off metal surfaces, cutting through everything in its path. Knispel cried out and collapsed against the gun breech, blood spreading across his uniform. His loader screamed his name. His commander grabbed him, trying to stop the bleeding. But the wound was deep, deadly deep. The Tiger lurched backward as the driver attempted to pull them away. But another shell slammed into the rear hull. Flames erupted from the engine compartment. The crew knew it was over. They evacuated the burning tank, dragging their wounded gunner with them. They carried Knispel into a shallow roadside ditch as the tank behind them burned like a funeral pyre. Explosions lit the sky. Smoke rolled across the field in dark, choking waves. Knispel's breathing was ragged. Blood soaked through his coat. His eyes flickered, drifting between the burning tank and the gray sky. One of his men whispered, "Kurt, stay with us, please." Knispel managed a faint, tired smile. "Did we stop them?" he asked softly. His commander squeezed his hand. "For a while," he said. Knispel nodded, satisfied. And with the distant thunder of Soviet guns echoing across the valley, Kurt Knispel, the greatest tank ace in history, took his final breath. He died as he lived, quiet, loyal, and unbroken. When the Soviets reached his position, the battle was over. The Tiger still burned, smoke curling into the sky like the last breath of a wounded giant. The bodies of Soviet and German soldiers lay scattered across the field. In the ditch, they found Knispel's crew huddled around him. The Red Army buried him with basic honors. His crew survived the war and later testified to his final moments testimony that would preserve his memory long after Germany itself had been reduced to rubble. His grave, long lost to history, was rediscovered in 2013 during an excavation near Verbovik. Inside were the remains of a tall man with tank crew insignia. The ghost had been found. Kurt Knispel never sought fame, medals, or recognition. He rejected propaganda, refused to embellish his victories, and never turned his battlefield prowess into politics. But history remembers him anyway. The deadliest tank ace of World War II, 168 confirmed kills, a legend to allies and enemies alike. His story stands today not as a celebration of war but as a study of a man who mastered a brutal craft with unmatched discipline, precision, and instinct. And while fame eluded him in life, it is his humility, his loyalty to his crew, and his quiet mastery of armored warfare that echo across time. **** In the cold forests of the Ardennes, in the frozen plains of Ukraine, in the shattered towns of Poland and Czechoslovakia, tank wrecks still rust in the earth. Beside some of them, old battlefield reports list a name: Kurt Knispel, a soldier without vanity, a warrior without hatred, a legend without a stage. And though the world has changed, his story remains like the echo of distant gunfire carried on the wind, a reminder that even in history's darkest hour, some men become something more than myth. They become ghosts,